get it off here. There you go. This is what people claim they saw, you know, when they see a Bigfoot. Gimlin and Roger asked me if I'd wear the suit, you know, and promised me give me $1,000, you know, for 10 minutes work. What the heck? That's kind of how we got, you know, mixed up in the Bigfoot thing. But he said, you can't tell anybody anything, nothing, no, nothing. I said, okay, I won't. So for 35 years, I kept it, you know. I denied it, it was me. And I denied it, you know, all those years. Well, we know it was you, no, you're full of beans. I put my legs in, and then I put my arms in, and then I stood up, and they zipped it up, and then the head went on last. I walked across there, and only took one shot of me going across there. It was hot, you know, I was afraid of getting shot by, you know, a hunter or something out there with a rifle.
For people to say, well, it had to be somebody in a suit and stuff, I said, I could tell if there was somebody in a suit. There was no such thing. I could just see everything moving underneath the hair and the muscle.
Have him look at my right hip. I had my jeans on. It was my wallet. He knows it was me.
Bob Hieronymus is not a very big guy. He probably only stands about 5'9" or 10.
Come to find out, well, you know, in the last years, he just lives down the road from me a ways.
He's my neighbor, but I still wave at him when I go by.
He won't speak to me, or he drives by, he won't look at me, and what?
He has waved at you.
Yeah, he has waved a few times, but he won't look this way.
The film footage actually speaks for itself. Not knowing sometimes does create a doubt if there is such a thing. If somebody comes up to me and says, well, that was fake, I'll just say, well, so be it. You know, if you can prove it, then prove it.
I'd been chasing this crazy fucking story I heard in the fall of 1993 about a Sasquatch tearing 3 guys apart on a cannabis farm in Mendocino County. And after weeks of trying, finally got a hit on somebody that had heard the story. This guy, Razor, he keyed in on, yeah, that rings a bell. And he had 2 critical pieces of new information. One was the 3 guys that were killed were Mexicans, and 2, that the location was not only Mendocino County, but specifically Spy Rock Road. Now, private investigator that I hired kind of disappeared for a couple weeks, and then he just came across with this text that was like, A, saying that he quit, and B, like, you are venturing into dangerous territory with this investigation. He won't return my phone calls, he won't return my texts, he won't answer my emails, like nothing.
Hello?
Hey man, this is David Holthouse. I don't know what your schedule's looking like next few weeks, you know, a month out, something like that. But if, is there any way we could knock around a bit together up in Mendo?
Yeah.
The next step is to find out what was going on with Mexicans working on dope farms in Mendocino County, what kind of shit was going on Spy Rock Road in the early 90s. You look at local news coverage going back decades, you know, stabbing on Spy Rock, shooting on Spy Rock, murder on Spy Rock, Spy Rock, Spy Rock, Spy Rock. Tell me about Spy Rock Road and what makes it different than other areas in Humboldt or Mendocino.
Well, I mean, back then especially, you're pretty cut off, you know, so you go up there and make a commitment to grow. You're not gonna be coming down every couple of days to get some.
You go up the mountain a little ways, and it's the Hells Angels control that part of the mountain. So it's a rough and tumble mountain. It's a mountain where there's always been rumors that why everyone else was getting robbed and home invasions didn't go on up there because it was protected in a way by the locals.
It was one of those areas where there was a potential for a heightened amount of violence. It wasn't the first time I heard someone got killed up there. It's not that hard to grow cannabis, but to finish it and to protect it while it's growing, that starts to add elements of danger and skill that are necessary to like pull it off. I mean, you had to control your farm, you had to control your area. You know, if you can't instill respect from your neighbor, then you gotta instill fear from them.
Early 90s, it's like full-on militarization of the war on drugs, right? Was it like being occupied by a...
Yeah, I mean, there would be armored personnel vehicles, you know, and I mean, I remember the word eradication was the word that they used the most back then. They were hell-bent on eradicating the cannabis plant. It was like you were trying to be a farmer in a war zone. The interdiction efforts by the DEA and camp have put a lot of pressure on the community, and so there's a lot of community trauma that's been just layered over the years.
Before I got to the Emerald Triangle in 1993, I had this vision of it being this sort of dope-growing, peaceful utopia. I didn't know the reality of the place, which was that they were all carrying guns. All these back-to-the-land hippies, these guys are all armed. Heavily armed, in a lot of cases. You know, listening to the Grateful Dead, but packing an AR-15. And then, there were the booby traps. One of the jobs on the farm was to check, maintain, and install booby traps, okay? And we visited a couple other farms to help string fish hooks on fishing line about eye level around cannabis patches. They also were setting small game traps and installing motion sensors around the perimeter. This was the era of camp and Operation Green Sweep. The DEA had made weed a top priority in the war on drugs. So paranoia was running high.
For those who don't know, what was CAMP?
CAMP stood for the Campaign Against Marijuana Planting. And it was a multi-agency task force that was developed in 1982 to eradicate marijuana in California.
In the same Northern California hills where the giant redwoods have grown for centuries are now hidden patch after patch of marijuana plants, known here as Humboldt Gold, America's most potent and profitable variety of the illegal drug. This week, law enforcement authorities have moved into Humboldt County in a major raid to begin chopping down and clearing out the clandestine croplands.
The first time I heard about camp was when I saw helicopters landing in the meadow of the school where our kids went to school. That was my first experience, hearing that womp, 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 which is terrifying.
They shake the whole hillside. They were in full combat regalia with automatic rifles hanging off the side of it, just staring back at me. Sometimes the soldiers would come down just on rope ladders and just demolish everything. They would just go from one farm to the next. Your whole year could be wiped out in the space of an afternoon, and that's what happened to a lot of people.
Welcome to the Emerald Triangle. The war on drugs disturbs me. It seems wrong to me that the government can go to war against its own citizens.
One drug agent said using the military to go after gardens planted by a bunch of aging hippies is like using a howitzer to kill a gnat.
You've got these people in armored helicopter gunships, you know, they're hanging out, you know, with their automatic weapons, you know. It's like, don't hit a bump, you know, and nail my wife and kids.
Some friends of mine were chased out of their house and across the meadow carrying their baby in their arms by a helicopter.
Their attitude has been, we can do anything we want. If people happen to live in an area where marijuana is being grown, they don't have rights.
A family lived in Trinity County, not involved with the industry at all. The cops came in, shot the dogs. The officers are above the law, basically. Doesn't really matter, dirty hippies. Doesn't matter, do whatever they want.
I don't know what motivated the camp officers to dehumanize a whole huge group of people, young families with children, with animals. It's a mystery to me.
When they work in operation, we would have patches made. If you plant it, we will come. From the movie, with Kevin Costner, that, well, this is the patch we used for 1 year. Camp was outstanding. Had a lot of fun working for camp. Something new every day. Something new every day. We had no clue what we were getting into, but for the most part, yes, it was fun. Dangerous, rewarding, and exciting. Real exciting.
They go up there and they be cowboys, man. Yoo-hoo! Flying their helicopters like they're in Apocalypse Now and come down and cut it down and like decimate the devil weed and put the farmers out of business and then smoke their pot. If you got caught, you're fucking going to jail for a long time. So every little grow area that I had on my patch, and a lot of other guys too, was handcrafted amongst the manzanita and the oak. So you couldn't see it. And it was really hard work. Back then, you had to carry everything on your back. You work all year long, and they just swoop in and they take all your labor, on all your effort and all your investment, and you're fucked. There's no money that year. There's no money for food. There's no money for diapers. There's no money.
After camp occurred, prices of marijuana skyrocketed because it had been so eradicated. So families became very protective of who visited their homesteads. At one point, there was a security store that opened in town. As marijuana became more and more valuable monetarily, there was the risk of someone stealing your crop.
I carry a gun when I go up there because there's been a lot of rip-offs around. I was ripped off last year up there, and we have to have security set up all over the garden and somebody just constantly watching it.
A real cultural sea change happened in the wake of camp. It shattered the community, in that almost all of my initial community left.
Having that additional constant stress, that threat of, am I gonna be busted? Am I gonna be ripped off? Is somebody gonna lie to me? Is someone gonna set me up? And some people decide they don't wanna live that way any longer. And the smart ones took the proceeds and left the game behind. But some people just got caught up in it and didn't know when to get out. You know, money changes people. Ownership, it changes everything, because once you own something, now you have to protect it. So these hippies turned, some of them turned in a sense, because now they had ownership and they had something to lose and they had to protect it.
It's safe to say the more remote you are in Humboldt or Mendocino County, the more lawless it is?
Well, yeah, I mean, even though the height of the war on drugs has been diminished, most of the cannabis grown up here still is going to go toward the black market. That's changing, you know. That's why I shifted to participate in the regulated market, but the unregulated market is still bigger.
Hi, is this... could I come see you this afternoon or this evening in Laytonville? I could be there in about an hour. I'm close to Ukiah right now. Okay. Which parking lot? Boomers parking lot. Boomers? Okay. All right. Boomers is a bar. Gotcha. That was the piece of information that was confusing me. Okay. Parking lot of Boomers at 5 o'clock. Right. Well, that's classic Doper, right? I need a fucking parking lot in a car. You know, I've met probably a dozen or more old-time cannabis growers from the Emerald Triangle who are still active in the area, that are willing to sit down and talk to me, but there's no fucking way they're ever going to go on camera. Not super psyched on this arrangement, but I think that it's worth undertaking the risk. So, yeah, we'll go see what's up. Yeah. My whole career as a journalist has been built upon the fact that, for reasons that I don't care to examine too closely, criminals feel very comfortable with my presence, and I feel very comfortable around criminals. I read to them as crooked as they are. It's always been the case since I was very young. A lot of the stories that I reported and wrote, I was chasing monsters in the sense that I was, pursuing my own demons that lived in my head. I mean, the most famous story that I ever reported and wrote was called Stalking the Boogeyman, which was about destroying a real monster that had done something monstrous to me. Well, this is no secret. I mean, I've been very public with the fact that I was sexually assaulted when I was 7 years old. I didn't have any sort of concept of sex or rape or anything like that. I just knew that it hurt like hell.
What was he saying?
I don't remember him saying anything.
Were you saying anything?
I don't think so. I think I was just crying. It's a pretty common consequence of that for people who are victimized by childhood sexual assault to come away from the experience with a, shall we say, a diminished sense of self-worth. And that enabled me to take risks without a lot of fear. Rolling around with just with a digital recorder going and with a hidden camera, you get a much more authentic representation.
Hey. Hello. Good, all right, you're right. You good? Yeah? Okay. How are you then? So you're a reporter?
Yeah, reporter, and I produce a documentary.
So you're looking for stories, huh? Man, I don't get those stories of read.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What kind of stories?
So tell me any story you're looking for. Scandalous, savage, and ID, or some other shit.
Murder stories?
Yeah, murder. Just a number of people do that. So it's perfect country for it. How many bodies do you think we're passing right now? I mean,
probably quite a few.
So,
this is, you're saying right up here, good country for killing people.
That's what the philosophy says. It's something you wouldn't even know it. It's that guy, Steven, we know this Steven in Ghana. And they moved to LA. They're doing drugs and buying and shit with us, but they should have known that day.
I was up with Old Time Grower. She told me a story about these guys from LA, you know, and they got killed and buried up there. And she said, like, one of her dogs went out and found their boots one day.
She found the dude's boots not too long after it went down. They've never seen that coming to themselves there.
He wasn't in the boots?
Yeah. He shouldn't be messing around like he was, you know.
Oh, is it dangerous for me to be here?
You're okay. You're not doing what you can do it to him.
Do you mind if I took a little footage of your property with my phone? No license plates. Holy fucking shit.
I mean, this is a place where overt racism is as widespread as it is anywhere in the country, including the Deep South, okay? And that was, if anything, even more the case in 1993 when these three guys from Mexico were supposedly killed. I met this guy named Juan, who was from Sinaloa in Mexico, and Juan was one of about a half a dozen cannabis growers that are subleasing land to grow weed on. They would all talk to me. They would all be cool with my taking notes. But as soon as I brought up the idea of doing an interview on camera, it was like, fuck no. And I understand why. If they get busted, like their families in Mexico don't eat. They're vulnerable. I mean, they're outsiders. If Juan just disappears off the face of the earth, I mean, his family is not even going to know where to start looking for him, let alone where to point law enforcement. Like the guys that allegedly got killed in 1993.
Up here, they put on this wonderful, we're enlightened, we're spiritual.
No, this is enlightenment up here. The tension between Latino people and white people in Northern California is huge. There's a lot of hatred and bad vibes and a lot of racism, very much. These towns are actually more or less, believe it or not, separated.
Starting in the 80s, the farmers in the Emerald Triangle hired Mexican laborers, the same as fruit growers in the Central Valley in California.
You know, these immigrants came into this environment highly motivated to like try to carve something out to make some money to send it back to their family at home, right? To make ends meet. These are hardworking brothers and sisters, man. I mean, I've had the experience of working on an organic farm, and I worked with 3 guys, 2 of them from Guatemala and 1 of them from El Salvador. And they worked me under the table, dude, and they were 20 years older than I was at the time, man. These guys were tough. Those guys were just trying to make a buck, try to send some money home or survive in this country. And I can't fault them from that. I just can't do it.
Nací en Oaxaca. Yo vine de México a los 4 años. Cuando inmigran los oaxaqueños para Estados Unidos, ellos quieren ver cómo se gana el dinero. En México no se gana tanto. Es poco. Muchos emigrantes mexicanos, uno quiere aprender sobre la marihuana o cómo se siente sembrar, sacar dinero. Pero es algo grave. Te estás arriesgando tu vida. Porque uno no sabe si son buenas personas con quien están trabajando.
Fair to say that criticism of camp represented misunderstanding of what a dangerous business it was?
It seemed in the beginning of the camp seasons, some of the growers were local people, entrepreneurs, if you will, trying to make a buck. And the perception of some of the public was that the marijuana growers and the marijuana business in general were love child, hippie type of operations, nothing to worry about, no danger involved. In 92 and 93, when we began to see more of the violence, the weaponry, the booby traps, we knew now that we were up against something a little different.
We've had barbed wire. We've had one with a bear trap on the trail.
They're protecting their sites, whether it's fish hooks hanging from leaders, buried shotgun shells, and you name what else.
When the gold fields of California opened up, it wasn't the best and brightest that came to Pam for gold. It was like people trying to extricate a high profit for a little amount of work. The same thing happened to growing cannabis. And some of us become bad actors. You know, you get held hostage, you get tortured, you pick up a drug habit, or you do a little bit of time. You go back up there, you're not the same anymore.
A lot of harder drugs started coming in, and you had people up there that were probably high on cocaine or amphetamine or heroin constantly. People started building sheds or bunkers underground and grew more and more marijuana indoors. My near neighbor, once he retreated into his bunker, he started doing either cocaine or amphetamines to keep himself awake, to guard it all. So he would sit there watching his money pile up, but he could never spend it because he couldn't leave. And eventually, I don't know how many years later, he just died there of a heart attack.
You know, the guys in the backwoods, they get isolated, right? And you get kind of desocialized. You like become like an undomesticated animal. And you come into town and it's loud and it's bright and there are rules. And I have friends that like literally disappeared into the woods that just became feral. In that kind of environment, when you're that isolated, it's very easy to enter another kind of mental realm.
I mean, someone doesn't have to be an amphetamine addict to have been out in the woods maybe too long and been traumatized by being out there and fearing for their lives. I feel like all the Sasquatch stories I ever heard emanates from that traumatic feeling of like, I might not belong here and something is gonna take me out.
The fall of 1993, I totally believed that those guys that came to the cabin were convinced that there was a omnipresent threat. And one of them was traumatized. It was like, no, it wasn't a fucking ripoff. All the weed's still there. Typical marijuana patch at that time of the year, we're talking about, you know, $200,000 to $300,000 worth of weed. You know, it was there for the taking. And by this guy's account, whoever killed these three guys didn't take the weed, so it wasn't a ripoff. It was just, you know, the plants were all torn up, but they were just left strewn about. Now, the other thing that I would later figure out is that he was on crystal meth. And that a lot of the people I'd been meeting during the last couple of days were tweakers. I just hadn't any experience, you know, with the toothless and ruthless up to that point. I would love to find the guys that came to the cabin that night, but I think there's a high likelihood that those two guys are dead. Tweakers don't have a long shelf life. The guy goes out the door still like ranting about how the fact that they got to warn everybody up there. The guy that owns the place sits down and he goes, well, that was pretty fucking weird. And we all just started laughing. You know, I mean, it was like a release of tension kind of laughter, but we all just busted up laughing. And then we didn't say anything more about it. I reach out to a confidential source. He absolutely refused to go on camera and has really good reasons for not going on camera. He's turned his life around, he's gotten clean. He got out of the dope game. He wanted to meet with me in person at a restaurant. We're there for hours with these retired weed growers, you know, drinking wine, eating. He's sitting across from me, and, you know, I'm not getting anything from this guy until the restaurant closes down and all the other patrons leave, and it's just our table. He sort of like leans into me, and he's like, I hear that you're looking into those three Mexican guys that greased back in '93. And he says, wow, man, that's pretty heavy. That's a poker face moment. So in the moment, on the inside, I'm like, fuck. On the outside, I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm doing, okay? The way that this source came across with the name was as if it was common knowledge, at least in this social gathering. And he tells me that worked on a farm that was owned by the Hells Angels. And now that jibed with other information that I've been told about what was going on in Spy Rock in the 1990s is that the Hells Angels had set up shop around Spy Rock Road. So again, it's another one of those pieces of information that kind of rises to the top, that fits. Hey man, let me ask you something. I mean, regarding, do you think he poses any sort of threat to my personal safety?
Yes, and honestly, I know people that he has sent the Hells Angels on. These boys don't play games, you know? They don't shoot.
I mean, look, with these kinds of investigations, I'm still alive because I do a constant risk analysis, okay? And my risk analysis in regards to this individual is don't put his name out in the public. It's not worth the risk. So as far as I'm concerned, he's an alleged killer only, and alleged killer he will remain. You don't know. Just in case we meet him, who's...
Oh, yeah, I don't want to...
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I want to avoid talking about that guy.
Avoid talking about...
Yeah.
Okay.
He's got long hair, and he wears a leather jacket with patches, a couple affiliation patches on it. He's got a big pickup truck. Looks like any one of a number of other deadheads. I don't know. He's a hyper guy. He's a high-strung guy. He's a curious character. He was a good neighbor, and he was very, very nice. You know, a few years ago, there was a murder on Spy Rock, and it was a guy from another country, and he got dumped along the side of the road, and the police swarmed the whole area, and they harassed. And I know he's one of the few people that stuck in there with lawyers and fought for his rights, and I know he got all his guns back.
So what was the murder where he was harassed by the cops?
That's the one that happened way later, where they found the one dead foreigner guy, and he was a trimmigrant. He was an outside guy, and they found him literally in a ditch up there by the road. And then the cops got pissed and came. That was when they came up Spy Rock. And that was way later than when you're talking about.
Esto pasó en el 2013. Era un cerro donde lo encontraron.
In summer 2013, Hugo was working as a guard and garden tender at a dope plot. He was apparently asleep in his tent, and someone murdered him by firing a shotgun through the wall of the tent. The cops got onto the murder because a family member called the Mendocino County Sheriff's Office and said that they were hearing from multiple associates that Hugo had been killed, and gave the cops the location.
El recuerdo que yo tengo de mi tío Hugo, él siempre me decía burla, se reía de mí. Él es el mejor tío. Quisiera ahorita abrazar. ¿Por qué? ¿Por qué a él?
But we really want to meet. We're going to try and figure out a way to get to him.
There's got to be a way, and I will try a backhanded way to do that, right? I got a Hell's Angel affiliate I know. I'm gonna call him. He may know how to get his phone number, and I'll call him up. I'll call him up tonight.
Great, that'd be great.
Captain.